Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. My name is Nick.
I'm Ian.
And this week we're going to kind of go back in time a little bit. Just a little bit.
In the Wayback Machine?
The Wayback Machine. We're going to talk about how our musical tastes have changed or haven't changed since we were a kid. Make sure you click on the link down below and go check out our Facebook group if you haven't done so yet. It's kind of a fun little community we've built to kind of continue the conversation about music, right?
Yeah, music, records, all kinds of stuff.
Anything music related, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up, hit the notification bell and the subscribe button down below.
Ding, ding.
That right there. I don't know about you, Ian, but I know my musical tastes have definitely changed since I was a kid. Yeah, I was born in 79, so I grew up during the kind of interesting time in the 80s where their music changed almost daily, it seemed like.
Yeah, there were a lot of changes in the 80s. More so than the 70s, but the 70s had a much, I think, better era. It was a better era of music.
Yeah.
But the 80s still gave us a lot of good stuff. I don't think my musical tastes have changed that much, to be honest with you.
No?
No, not. I mean, little bits and pieces.
Well,
here and
I think
there,
I guess that's what I'm kind of talking about, though, is there's a lot of stuff I listen to. Now, granted, there's a lot of music I listened to growing up, like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, bigger artists like that, or bigger bands like that, Ozzy, Alice Cooper, that kind of stuff I still listen to today. Mm. But I would also say there's a lot of bands on the kind of like the outer edges, maybe stuff that like my parents liked when I was growing up, bands like Chicago, Journey, bands, that, I listened to maybe because of my parents or because it was on the radio. And then as I kind of got older, I guess I got interested in different things. For me, I got interested into punk, ska, things like that as I got older.
Yeah, I mean, my musical tastes have expanded for sure. And there's a few artists that, like I mentioned before we started recording, Bryan Adams. I loved Bryan Adams when I was a kid. I had a mixtape that somebody made my mom and she gave to me of Bryan Adams. I don't think Bryan Adams is someone I would go to as to listen to now, but doesn't mean I wouldn't.
Yeah,
just not But I mean, I would play that tape all the time. And then another mixtape that I had was Night Ranger. Same thing. I don't know if I'd ever really go back to that, but
yeah. That's what I'm talking about, though, is like stuff that we were interested in. Like when I was growing up, my parents, my dad listened to a lot of different music, and my mom listened to a lot of country. So, I grew up listening to like Alabama, Patsy Cline, artists like that, when I was a kid, I was a fan of. Now, not so much,
For me, again, I could say Bryan Adams, Night Ranger, REO Speedwagon. That would be about it. Bands that I liked or listened to as a kid more regularly that I just don't really listen to now. And I guess Michael Jackson to a degree, but only because his output later in life wasn't as great. I mean, Thriller, I had it on cassette. I wore that thing out.
Yeah.
But it's still something I would listen to now. It's just, there's some of his other stuff.
Because I think getting into like Bad and things like that. Yeah. I would throw Michael Jackson into that also. Yeah. I guess I'm a little more of a casual fan of a lot of his like pre-Thriller, and I guess really post-Thriller stuff too. I mean, like I said, Thriller was a fantastic album. One of my earliest memories is sitting on the floor in my bedroom listening to Thriller on one of those plastic turntables that I think everyone had back in the 80s. And really, I guess after... What year did Bad come out?
88.
88. So around that time, I was getting into Metallica, Guns N' Roses, bands like that. So I think that my musical interests were changing to a point where, I mean, Bad, looking back on it, is a great album. I just wasn't a huge fan of it. So I guess that's when
I don't think, I mean, it sold well, and it probably, on an artistic level, was on par with Thriller, but it didn't have the same... It didn't grab you the way that Thriller did.
Yeah, it obviously didn't have that commercial hit that,
Another one that would probably kind of apply in a sense would be Bon Jovi.
Yeah,
it was around that same time that Bad came out. I mean, it's right around Slippery When Wet and New Jersey when that came out. and I had both of those on cassette. I mean, I wore those out too. But those are two that I would like to get on vinyl record, to have now. So I don't know if that necessarily applies, but post New Jersey, Bon Jovi just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, and it was interesting because, like I said, I grew up listening to a lot of my parents' music, and then I started listening to a lot of that, like, heavier metal in the late '80s, and then I got into grunge and punk in the '90s, and there's even a lot of those grunge bands that I listened to. A lot of like the one-hit wonder kind of bands. I guess they weren't really like one-hit wonders, but they were lesser known bands that back in the day that I guess as I got older and maybe have gone back and listened to, the music wasn't as good as I remember it being, really. Maybe it's...
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think my musical taste kind of took this similar trajectory, but, as a kid, like I said, aside from those mixtapes that I got from my mom, I mean, most of the stuff I had was my parents' stuff, records that they had and given to me. So, I mean, it was stuff that it was, kind of from their influence, but there was a lot that wasn't, like the Bon Jovi. And then when I got into the, the heavier stuff, the Metallica and stuff like that. But then I kind of went backwards and went more into what my parents listened to, I think. I really kind of embraced the 70s stuff more so than what I was growing up with at the time.
Gotcha.
And now I look back and I don't think I missed anything because I was there and I was aware of it, but I didn't appreciate it the way that I do now. The grunge stuff and the more metalish kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of music's like that though. That you don't really, when it's fresh and new, you don't really appreciate it the same way that you do maybe going back and. That's one thing I can say about getting back into vinyl these last, several years is I've kind of rediscovered some of that music that I listened to when I was younger. I think White Lion is a great example for me as a band that I loved growing up.
And then he kind of fell away from it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as I got into heavier music and my musical interest changed, I stopped listening to it. I didn't listen to any of their music for probably, 25 plus years. And then, once I got back into buying vinyl, I kind of fell back into some of those albums. And it, I kind of remembered what made those albums so good in my eyes, at least.
For me, an equivalent would be like Europe and Dokken. Huge Dokken and Europe fans in the 80s.
There's also a couple of bands that I think, were victims of kind of the changing times. Warrant is a band that I loved as a kid. I loved, their first couple of albums I thought were really fantastic. And then kind of musical interests, nationally, globally changed. And they kind of lost a lot of that steam, the popularity in the public eye. But going back and listening to some of their later albums, after Cherry Pie, they made some really great music. Just a lot of people just didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of bands like that had that issue.
A lot of those like later '80s bands,
right? The hair bands, really. Guns N' Roses was, I think, a huge turning point for hair bands because it turned away from that glam rock element
more to like a heavier metal.
Heavier metal, and I think that potentially, at least for a lot of bands, opened up for them an ability to really make some good music that no one bought, no one listened to because, everyone was switching over to grunge and darker, heavier metal type stuff.
Yeah, I definitely encourage everyone, if you were a fan of Warrant, to go back and listen to some of those Warrant albums. Because like I said, the stuff that they did after Cherry Pie that no one really listened to is some really good music. They really kind of changed it up and like got away from that kind of like hair band image that they had in the 80s, and they just did some really great albums. Unfortunately, a lot of those aren't available on vinyl, but hopefully one day they will be
I would
available.
think so eventually, yeah.
Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you guys think, how your interests have changed, over the years. As two old guys sitting here, I guess we can complain about the old days.
Real quick, I would say, historically speaking, most people their tastes tend to shrink as they get older. Mine have expanded.
think mine
I'm
have
way more
expanded
open
a lot.
to
Yeah,
music
absolutely.
than now, different types of music now than I ever was when I was younger. And,
I would
you know,
completely agree with that too. So, it's interesting. It's kind of interesting to kind of go back and see some of the stuff that you're into, I guess depending on your age, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, and kind of look back at that, compare it to kind of where you are today. But I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's an interesting topic. Let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below.
Ding ding.
Hit that notification bell. And that's all we got. Until next time,
Talk to y'all later.
keep on spinning. Peace.